What if I told you that the worst loneliness is not being forgotten? Prompt: a woman sits alone at an elegant brunch table, holding a cup of coffee, while others in the background laugh among themselves. The camera focuses solely on her gaze, distant and sad. Dramatic cinematic style, soft lighting contrasting with the false cheerfulness around her. Charleston shone like a polished postcard to visitors. The brunch tables exuded orange, sugar, and condescension. My mother raised the mimosa as if raising a verdict. No mercy. Do you think they would invite you? She said, almost smiling. The ice broke from the inside, but no one heard the crack. My Aunt Pauline completed the ritual with a long drink. Let her feel important for a day, he commented nonchalantly. My brother laughed, as if fulfilling an old and comfortable role. I held the coffee cup with both hands, like an anchor. I smiled at the right cadence, nodded in time with what they expected. The table became a stage and I was an extra with no lines. The light passed through the glass, illuminating crumbs and expectations. The waiter brought more bread, and with it the old choreography. Comments below, jokes aside, wounds without bandages. I remembered every rubric, every pause, every imposed silence. You always take everything so seriously, my mother said, softening the blow. Family needs lightness, Meredith, he added, sweet and cutting. The word family weighed like an overdue debt. I breathed around the edges of the glass, hidden in the steam. The heart beat low but steady, refusing the script. I thought about the bills I paid invisibly: flights, hotels, insurance, small life leaks. Pauline's smile always came without a receipt, but it was expensive. Brett lived on bonuses that never arrived, promises with interest, and I held the table, while they laughed at my silence. Welcome to family ashes, I thought, burning inside. Their secrets were not buried, they turned to ash and dust. The truth ran, looking for somewhere to hide. Without success, I watched the cutlery shining like little sentences. I realized that affection, there, always cost an extra payment. You're too sensitive, my mother said, waving her hand. The sentence came with expensive perfume and ancient impatience. My aunt agreed with a raised eyebrow. My brother looked away, as if he didn't want a confession, and I understood. Sensitive was just the nickname for guilt. I looked out the window and saw the sunny, indifferent streets. Cars drove by as if nothing was on trial. I chewed slowly, tasting salt and memories. The waiter collected dishes like someone collecting clues. My coffee went cold along with my last shred of hesitation. Thank you for reminding me of my place, I thought, without saying. It wasn't irony. It was diagnosis. I had always been the ready-made solution. The emotional ATM. The one who pays, organizes, justifies, and then apologizes. It was the day the receipt would change hands. I left the restaurant with the sun shining in my face. The heat seemed to demand an answer that I owed. In the glass of the door, I saw my reflection. Straight and whole, neither martyr nor villain, just a tired woman. That's when I decided there would be no next session of this theater. The road between Charleston and Denver stretched like a question. I drove in silence, no radio, no apologetic noise. The kilometers became lines that I finally crossed. The steering wheel was steady, the hands were dry, the breath was telling the truth. I repeated, today, I choose myself. The plates passed like receipts from the past. Each city remembered a favor done, a request granted, phone in airplane mode. My first barricade. If they needed me, they would find an empty space. This time, emptiness meant peace, not abandonment. I entered Denver in the early morning hours that smelled of metal. The lights from building to building were windows into the future. My apartment. 2 doors, 2 choices, 2 chances. I put water to boil, mint in the teapot, pulse slowing down. I breathed in the vapor like someone signing an internal treaty. I opened the laptop and typed the subject, ready now. Thomas Reed was the practical hand of my courage. The email came out like an arrow that finally finds its target. We can move forward with selling the cabin, I wrote. I sent without mercy, but with mercy for me. Then I opened the family credit pool, authorizations. Self-payments, cards linked to my veins. I removed them one by one, without trembling, without drama. How to fix a room that I loved and that hurt me. Each click was a grain of sand leaving the gear. I opened the legal folder, deed, insurance, receipts, a decade, all in my name, a signature that sustained summers. They called it our cabin when they wanted to relax. When it came to billing, it was always Meredith's thing, my problem. I copied the sales contract, named it, saved it, closed it. The system's question kept asking, are you sure? I had, for the first time without asking permission. I clicked confirm as if opening a window. The air entered, not as wind, but as space, my body, my story, my fair price fit. There was no announcement, nor indirect group message, no messages, no sugar-coated drama. I just pulled the right threads and unraveled the web. The inner house stopped creaking due to lack of weight, silence stopped being a threat and became a path. I closed the laptop while the city was still whispering. I walked in the dark hallway, feeling my way along the clean walls. I went to bed without preparing any defenses, without any speeches for tomorrow. The whole night was up to my decision, serene. I fell asleep like someone returning the key to their heart. At dawn, the light entered without asking for an explanation. I made another coffee, this time hot all the way through. The cup was no longer an anchor, it was a shelter. Deep down, there was the reflection of someone whole. I whispered, I am not cruel. I am free in process. The road between Charleston and Denver stretched like a question. I drove in silence, no radio, no apologetic noise. The kilometers became lines that I finally crossed. The steering wheel was steady, the hands were dry, the breath was telling the truth. I repeated, today, I choose myself. The plates passed like receipts from the past. Each city remembered a favor done, a request granted, phone in airplane mode. My first barricade. If they needed me, they would find an empty space. This time, emptiness meant peace, not abandonment. I entered Denver in the early morning hours that smelled of metal. The lights from building to building were windows into the future. My apartment. 2 doors, 2 choices, 2 chances. I put water to boil, mint in the teapot, pulse slowing down. I breathed in the vapor like someone signing an internal treaty. I opened the laptop and typed the subject, ready now. Thomas Reed was the practical hand of my courage. The email came out like an arrow that finally finds its target. We can move forward with selling the cabin, I wrote. I sent without mercy, but with mercy for me. Then I opened the family credit pool, authorizations. Self-payments, cards linked to my veins. I removed them one by one, without trembling, without drama. How to fix a room that I loved and that hurt me. Each click was a grain of sand leaving the gear. I opened the legal folder, deed, insurance, receipts, a decade, all in my name, a signature that sustained summers. They called it our cabin when they wanted to relax. When it came to billing, it was always Meredith's thing, my problem. I copied the sales contract, named it, saved it, closed it. The system's question kept asking, are you sure? I had, for the first time without asking permission. I clicked confirm as if opening a window. The air entered, not as wind, but as space, my body, my story, my fair price fit. There was no announcement, nor indirect group message, no messages, no sugar-coated drama. I just pulled the right threads and unraveled the web. The inner house stopped creaking due to lack of weight, silence stopped being a threat and became a path. I closed the laptop while the city was still whispering. I walked in the dark hallway, feeling my way along the clean walls. I went to bed without preparing any defenses, without any speeches for tomorrow. The whole night was up to my decision, serene. I fell asleep like someone returning the key to their heart. At dawn, the light entered without asking for an explanation. I made another coffee, this time hot all the way through. The cup was no longer an anchor, it was a shelter. Deep down, there was the reflection of someone whole. I whispered, I am not cruel. I am free in process. The account's dashboard looked like a prison map. Each icon represented a piece of my stolen autonomy. I stared at them like someone looking at old chains. They were not chains of iron, but of guilt, and guilt weighs more than iron. My mother, Pauline, and Brett were authorized users, each one with passwords, accesses, invisible dependencies. Removing them felt like cutting umbilical cords. I never had children, but I was the mother of all of them, and I finally decided to stop giving birth to responsibilities. The system asked again, are you sure? The button seemed to mock my former hesitation. I clicked without thinking, leaving no room for regret. It was like sweeping a dusty room. And for the first time, I breathed without dust. I reviewed old folders, insurance receipts, paid renovations. Everything had my name on it in solid letters, without gaps. There was the truth that no one admitted. I was not the caregiver by choice, but by convenience. They gave me a paper that I never signed. The file with the contract remained open on the screen. The cold letters brought a warm promise, freedom. Just send it and it would be official, but I preferred to wait for dawn. As a ritual, I wanted the sun to witness my liberation. As I turned off permissions, I felt waves of memories. I saw my mother asking for just a plane ticket. Pauline asking for just a hotel reservation. Brett vowing to return it as soon as the bonus lands. Every memory was a withdrawal from the cash register of my soul. I closed my eyes and saw the cabin on the lake, the broken swing, the peeling windows, the tall grass. It wasn't just wood, it was my committed youth. Every bill paid was a brick in my prison, and I, alone, kept the cell running. Click after click, the names disappeared from the screen. There were no more dependents, just me. The silence of the system seemed to celebrate with me. It was the first time the screen reflected only my power, and that was enough. I closed the computer and leaned back in my chair. I looked around and realized my apartment was home. No ghosts, no other people's debts, no invisible invaders. Every wall seemed to breathe with me, alone, but whole. Before going to sleep, I wrote on a piece of paper, "Freedom is not selfishness." I put it on the fridge door as a daily reminder. The next morning, it was still there, standing firm. I smiled as I walked past her, cup in hand, and I thought, now, no one can swallow me in silence anymore. The road to Pine Laurel Lake was an old acquaintance. Every curve brought memories wrapped in broken promises. Pine trees stood like guardians of forgotten secrets. My heart was heavy, but not with regret. It was the weight of years spent sustaining a collective illusion. The cabin appeared, the same and different at the same time. The broken swing still hung on the porch. The peeling windows looked like tired eyes. It was a portrait of abandonment disguised as tradition, and I, the involuntary restorer of other people's memories. I entered slowly, as if treading on sacred ground. The smell of damp wood mingled with ancient dust. The table I had been sanding for days was still holding together. Every corner screamed stories that only I held. It was a museum of unrecognized efforts. The photos on the wall displayed frozen smiles, noisy summers, barbecues, children running around on the lawn. I looked and felt no pride, just emptiness. There was proof that I was always behind the scenes, never invited, always needed. I calmly picked up each painting and put it in boxes. Not with anger, but with almost ceremonial precision. I wrote on the lid, "Family, what once was." Not to destroy, but to archive. I chose what would stay and what wouldn't come back. In the corner of the room, the torn sofa reminded us of stories. Brett spilling beer, Pauline napping for nothing. My mother complaining about the color of the curtains. Me, stitching invisible cracks in silence. Everything there breathed in gratitude. I opened my laptop on the wooden table. I wrote to Thomas, "We can move forward." Attached are documents. I sent it without hesitation, without looking back. The cabin was not a refuge, it was a burden, and I would no longer carry weight that wasn't mine. I walked to the lake, where the water reflected the sky. I felt the cold breeze touch my tired face. I didn't cry, I just breathed in the freedom coming. It was just a house, not my prison, and the lake seemed to silently agree. I picked up a stone from the shore and put it in my pocket. Not as a memory, but as a symbol of the end. I would leave the house, but I would take something small. Proof that I also existed there. No debt, no burden, just my version of the story. I left the cabin without looking back. The sound of the door closing sounded like a goodbye. There was no sadness, only clarity. The cycle was broken. I wouldn't go back as a prisoner. The first reaction. 2 days later. My phone vibrated non-stop. Brett was first. "My card doesn't work. I'm in Vegas." The following messages were filled with urgency. "Did you turn off the account?" He wrote nervously. I smiled silently. The collapse had begun. Soon my mother came, with a rehearsed tone. "Honey, the power went out. The bank refused payment. Can you look at this for me?" It must be a mistake. It was a mistake to believe that I would solve it forever, and for the first time, I didn't answer. The family group lit up like wildfire. Pauline sent a photo of the cabin. The porch was overgrown with weeds. "The power is out." "Meredith, what happened?" My father broke the silence to talk about expired insurance policies. I just muted the group and closed my phone. It wasn't revenge, it was payback. I had held on for years to what was never mine. Now, they gave back the weight they carried so well. It was time for everyone to face their own choices. My absence was the real message. The calls increased, without answer. The phone seemed to shake with their anger. But there was no more emotional debt in me. I was neither a bank nor a retaining wall. I was just me. And that was enough. I remembered every night spent organizing bills, every time they begged for help in the name of family, of every excuse I rehearsed when they didn't pay me. It was a decade summed up in unanswered demands. and finally, I was at peace with no. The word selfish appeared for the first time in the chat, soon came ungrateful, cold and insensitive. I took a deep breath, unaffected, and I understood. Words were weapons of those who always depended, silence was my shield. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment. I looked up at the clear, starry Denver sky. It was another lake, only of stars, and I realized that life could be beautiful without noise. Solitude tasted like peace. I took a sheet of paper and wrote 3 sentences. I own nothing. I don't carry anyone. I exist without approval. I stuck it on the wall, in front of the bed. I fell asleep with the messages still coming. The cell phone vibrated like an insistent ghost. But I no longer feared ghosts. They could scream, but they couldn't arrest me anymore. Silence was victory. Notifications came like sirens on my desk. Selfish, cold, ungrateful repeated themselves like an out-of-tune chorus. My mother typed long paragraphs of disappointment. Pauline said that I spoiled the family harmony. I read it all with the calm of a windless ocean. For years I called guilt care and duty. Now, I saw the gears of subtle blackmail. If I said yes, I was invisible and useful. If I said no, I became a monster and a traitor. The ruler changed according to the convenience of the day. I made coffee and sat in front of the open window. The wind brought a smell of distant rain. The city remained alive, indifferent to my wars. It was good to remember that the world didn't revolve around chat. My life had another center. Finally me. Brett sent an audio, his voice shaky and accusatory. You like to see us suffer, he said hoarsely. I stopped the audio midway and took 5 deep breaths. No one else would dictate my heartbeat or my breath. The pause was my silent prayer. I opened my notes and reread the reminder on the fridge. Freedom is not selfishness, I whispered, in a clear voice. The phrase anchored me like a discreet harbor. He didn't need applause to validate his choice. The criterion now was my truth. My body held memories of ancient tiredness. The right shoulder, tense from holding the world. The lower back, bent by other people's debts. The eyes, dry from looking for affection in receipts. Today, everything was resting like a field after harvest. The word sensitive returned with venom in the chat. I answered only to myself. Feeling does not diminish me. My sensitivity will no longer pay bills. It will guide decisions like a fog light. Being sensitive is knowing when to close doors. My mother tried the sweet tone which always worked. Daughter, we are family. We solve everything together. She smiled without irony, just lucid in the new language. Together, before, meant me doing for everyone. Now together would require shared responsibility. I left my cell phone face down on the table. The kettle whistled like a beginning and an end. Serve mint. Steam rose like a counsel. Stay, he said, stay in yourself, for once. And I stayed, inside myself, with all the lights on. I deleted the last unread messages, without guilt. Their words have lost their power to name. I named myself back, whole, sufficient, legitimate. The street outside continued its transit of possibilities. I crossed, inside, the path of my own life. I opened the spreadsheet of old debts with steady hands. Brett's number skipped like a stone in the pond. $4,000. 16 months of silence and promises. I have always put out fires without charging for smoke. This time, there would be an emotional police report. I wrote the email with the subject, final reminder. No adjectives, no sermons, just facts and deadlines. Due, July 31st. No extensions. I have attached proof of purchase as if installing new locks. I submitted and leaned against the column, hearing my heart approve. I forwarded it to my mom and Pauline. No drama, not out of malice, but out of surgical transparency. They always talked to each other when I served them. Now, let them talk to the present truth. The light was on in the usual dark room. The answers came in waves of disbelief. I can't believe you're that kind of person. You don't do that between family, Meredith. I read everything like someone reading an old manual. No page was any use to me anymore. The deposit came in, $1,000, from my father. No memo, no word, just money trying to cure history. Brett wrote, we're even. I didn't argue. I registered the movement and closed it. I'm not looking for poetic justice, I'm looking for possible justice. I felt like crying, but no tears came out. It was not sadness, nor was it a noisy victory. It was a quiet mourning for versions of me. The one who always saved, the one who always gave in. I waved goodbye to both of them, with respect and finality. I wrote the final email listing all the accounts. Energy, my name. Internet, my name. Insurance, my name, line by line, a decade became an inventory. In the end, the clear sentence, everything cancelled. I sent it at 1:12 a.m., with the city sleeping and me waking up. The return was the silence I needed, silence that does not suffocate, silence that gives back. In it, I heard my footsteps on a new floor. No creaks, no debts, no steps back. I walked around the house like someone shedding their skin. The next morning, Denver woke up to a cloudless sky. I opened the window and let the cold in unceremoniously. I breathed like someone who takes possession of their own name. I was no longer a piece on someone else's board. I was the board, the rule, and the playing hand. In the afternoon, I closed the spreadsheet and a memory along with it. The past screamed for the last time. Hoarse, distant, I listened respectfully, but did not respond. Some screams are echoes calling for food. I chose to starve them into silence. The path to the lake was quieter than before. This time, I took no memories, just decision. The road seemed smaller, as if I had grown up. Each kilometer was a line crossed out from the old notebook. I wasn't going to visit anymore. I was going to close. The cabin awaited me with grass up to my knees, fogged windows, peeling wood, lights out. Abandonment began to show on her face without makeup. For years, I was the makeup of this ruin. Now, she showed her true face. I entered and walked through each room as if taking inventory. The kitchen, marked by noisy meals without gratitude. The room, witness to discussions muffled by the wall. The bathroom, smelling of mold and silence. Nothing there was mine, even though everything was in my name. I took the boxes with photos and closed the souvenir lids. I left the walls bare, cold, devoid of stolen stories. It was an ordinary house, without a borrowed soul. I didn't need to destroy, just vacate. The memory was now in me, not in the walls. I sat at the table that I had once sanded with sweat. I opened my laptop and finished the message to Thomas. I confirmed the sale. Attached are the final documents. I attached files as if releasing chains. I sent it. Without hesitation, without looking back. Outside, the lake reflected a tired sky. The water gave me back a clean and solitary image. There was no noise of barbecue, no voices calling. It was just the sound of the gentle waves against the shore. And there, finally, I heard my own breathing. I ran my hand along the worn balcony railing. I felt marks left by hands that never thanked me. But I also felt the end materialize in wood. What was once a prison was now just an empty structure. The prison became a ruin, and the ruin became nothing. I closed the door calmly, in no rush to leave. It was not a gesture of anger, but of liberation. There is no revenge in returning a house to silence. There is only justice in not carrying it alone anymore. The lake said goodbye to me with a reflection of dawn. In his pocket, he still kept the stone from the shore. It was light, rough, silent like me at that moment. Not a memory of burden, but of choice. I took it as a symbol, not as a bond. This time, the cabin didn't follow me. As I drove back, I felt a knot untie. There was no longing, only clarity. There was no guilt, just space. The road brought me back to real life, and for the first time, I received it. My cell phone exploded with calls as soon as I arrived. Pauline sent messages in all caps, indignant. My mother used the tone of tragedy she knew well. You destroyed what was ours. Meredith. But nothing was ever theirs. Brett sent long audio messages, full of anger and apologies. He spoke quickly, like someone trying to patch holes. We could solve this another way, he said. I translated. We could continue exploring you. I didn't answer. Silence was my new language. The photo of the cabin was circulating in the group. Abandoned porch, tall grass, light off, look what Meredith did. I smiled to myself, because no one said, look what we didn't do. The truth is that they never cared, they just enjoyed it. My mother, through virtual tears, wrote, you will regret it when you realize you are alone. I closed my eyes and felt the irony on my skin. I've been alone my whole life, I just didn't realize it. Now, loneliness was not a punishment, it was a conquest. The messages increased, ranging from pleas to threats. Now they asked for understanding, now they launched sharp accusations. The oscillation was familiar, almost predictable. But I didn't waver with them anymore. I remained on the straight line of my decision. Brett tried to play the childhood card. Remember summers at the lake? It was special for everyone. Laughs, bitter and lucid. Special doesn't pay bills, doesn't return sleepless nights. the special was only for those who had never signed bills. My father broke the silence, simply sending, "Did you need this?" I answered within myself, "He needed me, not you." I didn't type anything. What I didn't say weighed more than words. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream. I deleted the group from the screen and left the phone. I prepared chamomile tea, breathing in slow steam. I looked around my clean apartment. No billing noise, no hidden bills. Peace occupied the place that was once theirs. I thought I'd answer with a single paragraph, but I preferred to respond with absence. My presence had already cost too much. Now, the price was theirs, not mine, and I didn't negotiate anymore. I lay down and stared at the ceiling until I fell asleep. Their voices still echoed in the distance. But they were echoes of a place I no longer inhabit. My body was loose, light, free, ready, and I slept like someone who. 2 days later, the doorbell rang insistently. I looked through the peephole. Brett, worn hood, tired look, in his hands, a crumpled paper bag, the smell of alcohol. I took a deep breath before turning the key. I opened it just a crack, enough for the confrontation. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. The voice was a mixture of pleading and contained anger. "We are brothers, we need to talk." The echo of childhood wanted to soften me, but the weight of the years kept me firm. "Talking always ended with a request from you," I replied. He looked away, not denying, not admitting. "You didn't have to cut it all off like that, all at once." I looked at the door, still almost closed. The answer was in the space between us. "I didn't cut, I freed," he said calmly. Brett ran his hand through his hair uneasily. "You took it too far, Meredith. The cabin was ours." I laughed, but without joy. Wow. Where were the receipts in my name? The silence fell heavy as a stone on the lake. He swallowed hard, unable to maintain the charade. Still, he tried another appeal. "I know I messed up, but you could have spoken up." Spoken? I screamed for years, they just didn't listen. "The problem isn't that I don't talk, Brett, it's that you never listened." The sentence came out firmly, without a tremor. Old Meredith would have given in to the tear, but she wasn't there anymore. He held out his hand as if begging for alms. It wasn't affection, it was more of a fantasized promise. I nodded and grabbed the doorknob. "If I bring you another debt, don't come back," I declared, and I closed the door with the gentleness of someone who chooses. On the other side, slow footsteps echoed in the corridor. No scream, just the weight of defeat. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just breathed. It was the breath of someone who doesn't turn back. I sat on the couch, feeling a clean emptiness. Silence was not absence, it was conquest. The walls seemed to confirm my decision. The whole apartment breathed with me. Finally, I was home to myself. I took a pen and wrote in the notebook, "Closing doors is also loving yourself." The scribble became a prayer of independence. Smile lightly, without fear of loneliness. I was no longer alone, I was with myself. The next morning brought blue skies over Denver. The streets were waking up, but my house was already at peace. The doorbell didn't ring, the cell phone didn't vibrate. It was the kind of silence that used to scare me. Now, that was what I wanted most. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee. The steam rose like a silent companion. I opened the notebook and reread my written sentences. Each line looked like a fresh tattoo on the skin. Freedom smells like paper and fresh ink. The first few hours were full of strangeness. My body expected demands as an automatic reflex. But nothing came, just the sound of the wind. I realized how addicted I became to other people's emergencies. Without them, the void seemed almost frightening. I lay down on the couch and let my mind wander. I remembered the girl I was, always wanting approval. Each achievement became currency to buy affection. Today, I understood that bought affection never lasts, and what lasts doesn't need a receipt. I took a small box from the closet. There were old letters and photos of the family. I felt the weight, but not the pain. I placed the box at the back of the shelf. Not as a treasure, but as a closed archive. I cooked for myself, without an audience. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air. I ate slowly, savoring the lack of rush. I discovered that the food tasted different without any charges. It was nutrition, not obligation. The cell phone flashed with an unknown number. I let it ring until it stopped, without curiosity. The silence afterwards was even sweeter. It was proof that the world doesn't fall apart without answers. Sometimes the greatest power is not to answer. I walked to the balcony and looked at the horizon. The Denver mountains glistened in the cold sun. It was a reminder of greatness and permanence. My pain seemed small compared to that landscape. And my freedom, immense. I wrote down another phrase in my notebook, almost like a mantra: silence does not erase me. It writes me. I closed the pages as if sealing a pact. It was me signing my new biography. No proofreaders, no editors, just my handwriting. I fell asleep early, enveloped in the sound of nothingness. There were no voices pleading, no fingers pointing. There was just me and the echo of my decision. The silence that once hurt now lulled. It was the lap I had been waiting for my whole life. The intercom rang on a clear Saturday afternoon. A female voice asked, "I'm Lauren, Brett's girlfriend." I hesitated before opening the door, but I allowed him to enter. She walked in with red eyes and makeup intact, in his hands, a bundle of papers tied with an elastic band. "I didn't come to fight," he said, sitting down slowly. His voice trembled between anger and disappointment. "I found documents on Brett's desk, everything in the cabin, since 2009, in your name." He pushed the pack across the table as evidence. I opened the package and saw my signature repeated: bills, insurance, receipts, taxes. Each page was an official souvenir. My struggle was recorded in black and white. There was no room for dispute. Lauren looked down, embarrassed. "He told me the cabin belonged to all of you, that he was in the contract, that he also took care of it." I swallowed hard, no surprise, just confirmation. "He built a castle of lies," I added. She sighed deeply, as if she were losing years in minutes. "I believed it, Meredith. I was even proud of it, but I realized it was an invention to look like a hero." The teary eyes reflected my own pain. She had also been deceived by him. "I'm not here to create confusion," he continued. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you did, and to say that I can't be with him anymore." The words fell like bricks to the ground. I believed it. She was really leaving. We were silent for a few seconds. The weight of the past hung between us. Then, Lauren slowly stood up, at the door. He turned with steady eyes. "You are not invisible. Never forget that." I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness. It was validation. She had seen it. She had confirmed it. I wasn't a machine. I was a whole woman, and someone outside the family finally recognized this. I opened the papers again and turned each page. My hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from strength. Years of history, finally in the light. No one could distort the truth anymore. The lie no longer held me back. I kept the documents in a red folder. I wrote on the cover, my version of the story. I put it on the highest shelf of the bookcase. There, it would remain as a silent monument, not to the burden, but to liberation. Thomas's email arrived on a gray morning. "Sale complete. Transfer confirmed." I stared at the screen until the letters settled. The weight of years was suddenly lifted from my shoulders. It was official. The cabin was no longer mine. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just took a deep breath. Freedom sometimes comes without fanfare. It settles in slowly, occupying empty spaces. I made coffee and raised the cup to nothing. A toast to life beginning again. I spent days in silence, tidying drawers. I donated clothes, threw away old papers, each object eliminated was a severed loop. My house felt lighter, as did I. The void took the form of a new beginning. I decided to look for a new house. I visited remote neighborhoods, close to the mountains. I found a small one at the foot of Boulder, wide windows, bright kitchen, backyard with fertile soil. There, I saw a future I never imagined. I signed the papers with steady hands, without hesitation. There was no debt, there was no burden. It was a purchase made with clean money, man. The keys jingled like victory music. My heart beat to the rhythm of a new house. On the first day, I only took one suitcase: coffee, books, a blanket. I placed the armchair near the sunny window. I sat there and watched the light come in. That was all I needed to get started. I planted simple flowers in the small backyard. The land smelled of promise and rebirth. Each seedling planted was like a new root of mine, not for family, not for memories. For me, for the first time. The first night, I only cooked for one. The smell of soup filled the bright kitchen. I ate slowly, listening to the sound of the spoon on the plate. There were no charges. There were no comments. It was just me, whole, finally enough. I took out my notebook and wrote, "I'm at home." Simple, no frills, but true. It was stronger than any public statement. It was a pact I signed with myself. I lay down on the new bed and looked at the white ceiling. There were no memories stuck there, only the future. I closed my eyes and smiled in the dark. Peace covered me like a soft blanket. I had, finally, chosen to live. The following weeks passed calmly, without incident. My backyard bloomed slowly, colors emerging from the silence. The days were simple: coffee, reading, walking. There were no charges. There were no urgent notifications. Peace finally seemed like a possible routine. It was on an autumn morning that I found the card. It was tucked discreetly under the door. A sunset over a lake was in front. The purple and gold colors were reminiscent of pine laurel. My heart stopped for a moment. I turned the card over with cautious hands. Behind, just a short, firm sentence: "You deserved better. We should have done better." No name, no signature. Absence said as much as words. I held the card for minutes, motionless. It could be my mother, trying a veiled request. It could be Brett, in shy regret. Perhaps Pauline, in a rare gesture of conscience. Or maybe, I'll never know. I didn't cry when I read it, nor did I feel angry. The sentence did not change the past or erase pain. It was just a belated spark of recognition, and I didn't need that validation anymore. Still, I kept the card. I put it inside the red folder on the shelf, the one where I wrote my version of the story. Not as a reminder of affection, but as closure, a discreet but firm full stop. Some doors close without a lock, just with no way back. I went back to the yard and watered the newly planted flowers. The water ran down the land like a promise fulfilled. The open petals seemed to reflect my own lightness. There was no debt, only growth. There, time did not charge interest. On the porch, I sat with a mug of tea. The wind from Boulder carried the smell of mountains. The open sky reminded me of wide horizons. I smiled alone, without an audience, without a public. It was the most honest smile I've ever given. I took the notebook and wrote another sentence: "Freedom is not absence. It is presence itself." I closed the cover and leaned it against the table. This was my personal gospel, my manual, everything I needed to take from this journey. When night fell, I did not fear the dark. The shadows in the room had no familiar faces, just silence, just peace, just me. I closed my eyes, light as never before, and I slept knowing I finally chose myself.